we doing? We're going to go ahead and begin. My name is Casey Duplessis.
And I'm Melissa Miller.
And we're here today to talk to you about managing academic anxiety. So our first question to you is, what experience, if any, do you have with academic anxiety, and what are you hoping to get out of this today? Test anxiety?
I'll go into a test, like knowing all the information that I learned in class, and then just based on like how the wording is, or I don't know, my mind just kind of freaks out when I see the questions.
Okay, your mind freaks out when you see the questions. We'll cover that. Anyone else experience that? Test anxiety? Okay, a few hands. Cool. All right, well, if you have any questions at any time during this, feel free to let us know, and yeah.
Yeah, and I guess the second part of that question too is, what are you hoping to get out of coming to today? Go ahead.
I'm a resident assistant in one of the halls, and I'm hoping really stressed out or anxious and help them understand the big picture.
Okay, awesome. So as an RA, you're hoping to be able to help some of the residents with some of that stress and things like that? Okay, great. Anybody else? What you're hoping to get out of coming to today? Yeah, okay, learning how to manage that stress during a test. Okay, well, hopefully we can help out with some of that today. So we'll dive in. We are from Counseling Services. Also, I'm a licensed professional counselor. And
I'm an intern here.
So, yeah. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so we're going to start off talking about what is stress. Stress is a cause of a lot of our anxiety with different things, especially academics. So stress is an emotional, cognitive, physical, and behavioral reaction to any perceived demands or threats. I know that's a mouthful. So stress really encompasses all sorts of different things. There's the emotional part of it, whether that's just feeling really like discouraged, feeling scared, some of those emotions. There's the thought part of it, whether that's that you're thinking like, oh, this test is going to be horrible, or I'm going to fail this test too, or oh no, I have this presentation coming up and nobody's going to like it. So there's that thought component of it. There's the physical reaction. I don't know if you guys have ever noticed, but when we're stressed out, we tend to have some physical reactions too. So whether that's your heart beating faster, maybe getting a little short of breath, sometimes like if you start sweating a little bit, some of those physical reactions are part of it too. And then we have the behavioral reaction, some of those action parts of it. So we'll get into that here in a minute, into the action part. But this is to any perceived demands or stress or threats. Why do you think it says perceived? What would be the difference between a perceived threat and then an actual threat? Yeah, okay, so something that your mind kind of creates, you might build it up bigger than it actually is. Yeah, any other ideas on that? What's a perceived threat? I think that was a pretty good summary. So it's essentially something that you see as a threat, even though it may not actually be a threat. So like when you take a test, is your life usually in jeopardy when you're taking a test? No, hopefully not. But sometimes that's how it feels. So your body is responding in a way that it's perceiving that test as a threat, when it's really not an actual threat to your life, okay? But interestingly enough, we can have that same response to the stress as if there was an actual threat present, even though there's not. Okay. So some levels of stress are healthy. So for example, whenever a test is coming up or an assignment's coming up, you do want to be a little bit stressed out, right? Because you want to study, you want to do well on that, and that stress can actually propel you to doing well in that class or on that assignment. So some levels of stress are healthy. However, if you have too much stress, and especially if you have that over a long time period, that can be really problematic for you. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about how our body responds to that stress. So we have that fight, flight, or freeze response. I know a lot of us have heard about the fight or flight response. There's also the freeze. I know you're talking about freezing up when you start to take a test. So that actually is a real reaction that we can have whenever our bodies or our brains think that there's a threat present. So there's a reason for the fight or flight response. It's something that is built into us. If you think back like long, long ago, whenever our ancestors were around, there were a lot of physical threats that they had to deal with, whether that was like a lion or a tiger or something that was chasing them. Then they had to run for their lives, or even just like going after dinner, running after something to catch it. I mean, they're hunting, some of those situations. So in those instances, it was really helpful. When there's a lion or a tiger there, you want to be able to either run or fight it, right? And then sometimes some of us do react by freezing up as well. But in our normal everyday lives, even sometimes we react in that same way, we don't really need to have that same reaction. So when you go to take a test or when you go to prepare for an assignment, it's not necessary to have that same level of preparation like in your body and your brain as you would to fight off a big trigger, but that is sometimes what happens. That's how we react. So really, we end up getting a lot more stressed out than is appropriate for the actual situation. Okay, so some examples of stress responses. What happens when you hear the word pop quiz? If you go to a class and you hear pop quiz, what is your first reaction? Yeah, you feel sick. Exactly. Okay, what else? Heart racing. Panic. Yeah, exactly. What else? What are some of those other reactions that you have? Remember, these could be like physical, it could be what you're thinking, could be actions. Does anybody start quickly like reviewing the things in their head and your mind starts racing? Yeah, okay. Sometimes that happens too. Okay, so I think we covered a lot of these, but your heart starts pounding, you might breathe faster, you might notice your muscles tense up. Muscle tension is another big one that happens a lot. And again, none of these responses are actually needed in this situation. We feel like we're in danger, but we're really not. So one of the other things, sometimes just imagining yourself going blank on a test can trigger that response. So I don't know if you've ever noticed, sometimes thinking about an upcoming test can trigger the same response as when you're actually sitting there in the test going blank. Has anybody ever noticed that before? Okay, or maybe sometimes thinking about a big presentation that you have coming up, you just immediately feel as if you were giving that presentation. Okay, so now we're going to talk about what's the harm. So we have these reactions that are a little extreme that we don't necessarily need. What's the harm in having those reactions? There we go. Okay. So there's a lot of different effects to this, and Casey's going to go more into detail about those reactions and those effects. But some of them are that it can affect your ability to concentrate. You might not be able to remember facts as easily. Long-term effects can be really detrimental to your health. So if you're constantly living in the fight or flight response, it can really have an impact on your immune system overall. So you might notice yourself starting to get more colds. If you're just in a state of constant stress, it might be easier for you to catch things like the flu, or you might just feel really fatigued all the time. Headaches is a really common one. That muscle tension, like especially in your shoulders and neck, those are all really common effects of being stressed for a long period of time. So, okay.
So has anyone heard of the Yerkes-Dodson law? Or seen it? Cool. So the Yerkes-Dodson law was developed in 1908 by two psychologists, and basically what it says is that there's an optimal level of performance that you have, and there's a specific kind of level of anxiety that it takes to get to that optimal level of alertness. So too much can impair your ability to perform, and then too little can cause you to drift off or lose focus. So initially, this was developed for sports performance, right? So what's the optimal level that someone needs to run the fastest distance? What it does say also is that as you increase in intellectual, like if something is intellectually challenging, you want your anxiety level to be lower so that you can actually perform to the best of your ability. And then if you have an increase, something that requires more stamina or persistence, that you actually want to increase your anxiety for tasks like that, right? So I say this to mean that each task requires a different level of anxiety or stress response, right? And kind of like Melissa said earlier, like if you experience too much of that, it can actually become sickening to you. It can be like that response that you experienced where you just kind of got sick to your stomach, right? That's an example of where it's too much. Also, if you have too much anxiety, it impairs your ability to store things into your memory and recall them later. So, as I don't know if anybody's taken a test and froze up and forgot everything. Anyone? Yes, I'm seeing some head nods. Okay. So, like an hour later, when you're thinking about it and you're like, dang it, I totally knew that response. And this is what it was. Has anybody had that experience? You remember the responses later. Why do you think you can remember them later instead of in the moment? You're psyching yourself out during the test? Yeah. Okay. Anyone else have any guesses? Yeah, so psyching yourself out. Also the equivalent of like increased anxiety, kind of that freak out moment, that really tense moment where you get panic. Your ability to retain that memory and retain and recall things decreases in that moment. You don't want to go to sleep, but you don't want to be disorganized. This is also an example of the Yerkes-Dodson law. Kanye West tends to perform a lot, and he seems to never have any stress. I don't know why. And then there's just the fear, where you're not getting much performance out of anything, and you want to crawl into a ball in a corner, and you don't want to do anything. Has anybody been caught in that position before, called the fear? A little bit?
Maybe
Yeah.
for exams.
Yeah, it's a tough place to be in. So, relaxation doesn't mean binge watching The Walking Dead. That's too far. But it does mean that it's a state of awareness, right? So, it's a state of awareness, and it's a freeness of tension during which your mind can play with new information and create new associations. So, you can improve your grades by becoming more relaxed. Does that statement sound weird or different to anybody? Okay, can you say a little bit about that?
When I try to study and I'm just reading a lot, I mean, my algebra teacher told me.
Mm-hmm.
I try that, but I still have this anxiety about, am I going to remember all of this information?
Mm-hmm.
How do you relax?
Mm-hmm. We'll get into that, yeah. So study for 15 and then relax for 10. That's a technique that somebody told you about to kind of, right. Right. So on that bathroom bell curve that I was talking about earlier, like I'm guessing that 10 minutes, the anxiety kind of can come down a little bit, which would open up your brain to kind of packing that knowledge in and all that information that you need to learn. So, yep. So like I said earlier, when we're less tense, we can concentrate better and absorb more information, be more relaxed, and remember what we've learned. So some people stay up and study all night long or cram for exams, which is actually a more ineffective way to do studying because you tend to be more anxious in those moments, and the ability for you to actually retain that knowledge and information is lower. Yeah. So, how can you learn how to relax? Grounding. Has anybody heard of this term before? Grounding.
A couple of you.
Couple of you. Do you feel comfortable saying something about what you know about it? So establishing what's real, establishing your reality. So kind of differentiating the perceived threat versus, the test and the task at hand. Okay.
And part of that, getting back in touch with reality, like you said, too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Yeah. If something goes wrong in a test?
Like walking yourself through what would the worst case scenario be? Yeah, some people have used that technique to help them kind of think through, like, okay, what would the worst case scenario be? And then how will I handle that if it comes up? So sometimes going through that part about how you would handle it can help bring you back and calm you down. So yeah, that is a strategy that some people find helpful. Definitely.
Anyone else? Okay.
So let me pause for just a second.
Yeah.
So on the grounding piece, I think one of the easiest ways to do that is really to go through your 5 senses. So if we were going to do grounding in this room, you would really spend a minute going through, like, okay, what do I see? And not just the obvious things, like maybe take a moment and pick out a couple of things that you didn't notice before. So maybe count how many cameras there are, or find a color or something that you didn't notice. So you would go through what you see, take a minute and go through what you hear, and again, trying to really pick up on all the little things that you're hearing, not just the obvious one like me talking. So maybe can you hear a fan, or hear somebody's pencil, or hear clicking off of a computer, whatever it is, but like really tuning into those sounds. And then doing the same thing with what you smell, what you feel. The feeling can be like an actual feeling, or it can also be a texture. Like what's the texture of the chair? What's the texture of the desk? So going through that actually brings you back to the current moment. It can stop some of that cycle of the fight or flight response, bring you back to the moment, help calm your body down a little bit, and then get back to studying. So that could be something that you could do before an actual test. Like when you get to the classroom, if you want to spend a few minutes doing that grounding technique before the test, you could do that. Maybe take a couple deep breaths as well. And you could also do this before you study, or on a study break. So if you study for 15 minutes, want to do grounding to calm yourself back down, and then do some more studying, you can do that. So there's a couple of different ways you can use that grounding technique. This is a really good one to do outside as well. Like if you like to stand in the grass, or just go to like the rose garden and look around. So getting in that state of feeling relaxed is what's going to help you be able to absorb more of that information when you do get ready to study. So.
Yeah, so another piece to add, and I'm sorry, I don't know your name. Colette. So you'd mentioned kind of like studying for 20 and off for 10 and still feeling stressed out. Some of that could be that like while you're taking that 10 minutes, really being intentional about turning off phones, turning off distractions, turning off anything that might make you more anxious, and taking the time to, well, we'll talk about deep breathing and grounding. So everything that Melissa said, and then just kind of acknowledging the fact that you're on solid ground, right? Right now, you're on solid ground. And as of right now, and what you know, it's not going anywhere. Yeah. So deep breathing. Sometimes just remembering to take a deep breath. I don't know about you, but I sometimes go through the day and don't even check in with myself and say, how am I doing? How am I doing emotionally? Where am I at? Does anybody do this throughout the day? Does life just kind of pass you on throughout the day and you just kind of forget, right? To check in with yourself. Say, how am I doing? And deep breathing is a really good way to kind of notice your breath and notice your body, be more aware of how you're doing overall.
Does anyone know how to tell if you're deep breathing properly? That's something that we counselors kind of throw out a lot and just expect people to know, oh, everyone knows how to do that. Does anybody know how to tell if you're actually deep breathing or not? Okay, so one exercise that you can do is if you actually stick a hand on your stomach and then one up on your chest, and then you try to take a deep breath. And what you want to do is you want to get this hand down here by your diaphragm to move. So has anybody ever done band or choir? You have? Okay. A lot of times when you're singing or playing an instrument, you really have to learn to breathe from your diaphragm. So that's where you want to target that deep breathing. And it does take practice. It's not something that we just do naturally, especially when we're anxious. I mean, you think about when you're working out, a lot of times we do shallow breathing and we breathe from up here. So you really have to practice, and you want to try to do those deep diaphragmatic breaths from down here. So if you have to do that exercise, whether that's at your apartment or dorm room or wherever, and actually practice that with your hands, that's okay until you get the hang of it. So the more you practice it, the more that it's going to work for you in those moments when you are feeling stressed or overwhelmed. So that's just something to continually practice. And again, you could practice that before you start studying, during a study break, before the test. And the more you've practiced it leading up to a test or a presentation or something like that, the more effective it's going to be for you.
Yeah, and sometimes in the moment when we're in that kind of freak out panic moment, deep breathing might be a little bit difficult. Just to stop and take a deep breath. So be kind to yourself in those moments as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I know when I get really stressed out, sometimes it takes a couple of practices before I can actually get in a good deep breath. And I've been practicing this for several years. So it's okay if it takes a couple of times before you can really get in a good deep breath, and then try to do a couple of those.
So positive self-statements before, during, and after tests. You can encourage yourself. You can totally encourage yourself, and it is not a bad thing. Has anybody ever heard advice like this before? Positive self-statements. Or tried it? Anyone? Yeah, you? Okay. Anyone know the feeling of when a peer or a teacher or maybe a guardian says, you did a really good job? Like, someone notices that you're doing well, or notices something positive about you. It kind of lifts your spirits a little bit. So positive self-statements. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes even hearing them say, like, you've got this, you're going to do awesome. Pumping that confidence into you, having somebody else say that can be really uplifting. So it's okay if you have to say that to yourself. I'm prepared, I've got this, I'm going to do great at it. Telling yourself some of those things instead of what we talked about at the beginning, those statements of, I'm going to fail this one again, or I don't even know the first question. So how am I going to pass the rest of the test? You have to really be aware of what you're saying to yourself before leading up to tests, while you're studying, because if you're having those thoughts of, I'm going to do horrible at this, it could kick in that fight or flight response, and you don't want that. So practice going through these self-statements. Give yourself that little pep talk if you need to, that confidence boost. Mm-hmm. And if you have to write them down on a note card, that's fine. There's a lot of people who will have those written down, read them before the test, and then just put them away when you're taking the test. So whatever you need to do to remind yourself of those things.
Self-care. Has anybody heard this term before? Okay. Do you feel comfortable saying what you know about it?
Yeah, so I'm in social work, so we talk about self-care like every day.
Okay.
Every day in class and talk about our anxiety levels and everything. That's really great.
Yeah.
But yeah, so self-care, recognizing that you need to take care of yourself first so that out of that you're able to like fulfill your never going to be full enough to care for my residents or care for my relationships or my school.
Yeah. If I continue to take care of everybody else and not myself, then I'm not going to be able to do this for very much longer. Thank you.
And I love that idea of like being on empty, because I think that's possible for us to like get on empty and just be functioning at that level. So self-care is all about like filling yourself back up so that you do have that energy and that care. So yeah, good analogy on that.
There was a couple of other hands I saw. Anyone else have something to say about self-care? Are we good? Okay. So, Maslow's hierarchy of needs talks about our basic needs: water, sleep, that thing called eating, regular meals, not just one, exercising. So exactly that, just taking care of what we need first, drinking water, sleeping 8 hours a day. I know that tends to become a little bit difficult, especially when finals week comes around. But it's really important, especially for memory retention. A huge role of sleep is when we go to sleep, we store our memory from short-term into long-term memory, and we cannot do that successfully if we don't get enough sleep. Which also means that the things that you learn at the beginning of the semester may be really, really, really tough to recall at the end of finals when you're not getting enough sleep and storing that information.
Has anybody taken a test on an empty stomach before? You haven't? Okay. Well, I know I have, and it's really distracting because the whole time you're in that test, you're just sitting there thinking like, oh, I'm so hungry. It makes it really hard to concentrate. So it's really important to make sure that you've eaten before the test, or at least that you're eating your regular meals, getting enough water, things like that, because you want to eliminate any distractions possible that you have during the test. So really important to do that for yourself.
Practice setting appropriate boundaries. So this is boundaries for not only your personal goals in school, but it's also for like your life. So setting appropriate boundaries may mean that you have to hold off a conversation with a friend so that you can spend some time studying or catching up so that you're not caught procrastinating later on, or cramming, which we've kind of talked about is higher level of stress, right? So everything that you can do to maintain your boundaries so that your process during studying and retaining the information that you need is as low anxiety producing as possible.
Mm-hmm. Some of those boundaries, too, are being willing to turn off your phone or not check Facebook while you're studying. And I know it's really hard because so much of what we do now is on the computer. So we'll have like 5 tabs open all at the same time and then have our phone there. So it's really important to set boundaries for yourself during study time, as you're preparing, and to even set study time aside in the first place is really important. That's a boundary, making sure you have that time. But then when you're studying, make sure that you have eliminated those distractions for yourself. There have been quite a few studies come out that say, like, we're not as good at multitasking as we think we are. So it's really important to give your assignments, give your study time all the attention that you have. So if that means you have to turn your phone off, if that means you have to put it in another room, whatever you have to do. I know with mine, even if I have it across the room and it beeps, I'm sitting there wondering who just texted me. So whatever you need to do to keep your mind focused, set those boundaries for yourself because it's really important.
Is anybody here multilingual? No? So there's a study on multilingual individuals and babies who learn different languages from birth, and what they say is that when babies learn more than one language at birth, they can do that successfully, but that they remember less words from each language initially, and the same can be said about when you also learn something else new in school. So if you're learning more than one thing, or you have more than one thing open on your computer, you have more than one thing coming into your brain, you're less likely to retain the breadth of that information than you are as if you just focus on that one singular task. So plan for time to study and review notes. I don't know about you all, but I have a calendar in my phone and it is life for me. And sometimes it's called a crutch, but it works for me. So planning however you plan, if it's through your phone or if it's through a paper planner or however you do that, that is key. And holding to those plans, maintaining your boundaries. Nope, this is my half an hour for studying time, or this is my half an hour to review notes.
And I think the more prepared you are for the test in general is going to help alleviate some of that anxiety too. I think that's another source of anxiety that we don't talk about a lot is if you didn't prepare. If you just go into the test and you haven't studied at all, that in and of itself creates a lot of that anxiety. So it's really important to take the time ahead of time to plan, to prepare, to study, and making that plan so you're not just trying to cram for the test right before it comes up. Try to do it in increments. There's a lot of different study strategies out there, and we do have some previous Cat Chats recorded on different study tips, but sometimes breaking it up, reviewing your notes the day of class, like after class, taking time to review those notes, doing it on a regular basis instead of just waiting until a test comes up and then trying to review the last 4 weeks of things and trying to get that all in. So reviewing on a continual basis, doing small study times over the course of a few weeks can be really helpful instead of just trying to get it all inside your head in those 2 hours the day before the test. So really planning ahead is really crucial here.
Does anybody else have a life outside of school? Yeah, we all do.
All of us do, right?
We have families, we have friends, we have significant others, we have kids, some of us, whatever it is outside of life, outside of school, we have life. And so a big part of the self-care proponent and studying means that you're going to have to tell your significant others or people that you love dearest in life and say like, hey, I'm in college, which sometimes is going to require that I need a half an hour to study here or a half an hour there, and I may not have the time that I did before I came to college to kind of devote to these things, and asking for support and asking for help and asking people that you trust most to be the people that you can go to with all this anxiety and kind of talk it out to kind of reduce that. So,
what are some of the other activities that you all are involved in? I know that you all said you were resident assistants. What are some of the other things that maybe you guys are involved with outside of school or as part of school, part of your major even? Work. Yeah, work is a big one. Absolutely. Yeah, go ahead. Greek life. Yes. Yeah. Campus ministries. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is anybody involved in any organizations for their major? You two? A couple of you? Yeah. So has anybody found anything that has helped with being involved in so many things and having to balance those? Does anybody have some things that have worked for them in being able to study? Okay, so having that time set in your planner and then not doing anything else besides that. That's important because I know that's something I struggled with as a grad student is I would set that time, but then I wouldn't keep that appointment with myself. So it's really important to make sure that you do keep that time that you've reserved for studying. Yeah. Anybody else? What are some other strategies you've used?
I've gone to tutoring when I was here, and I've been to the writing. That really helps. Really.
Yes.
Because my husband is not going to help me with my work.
Right. Very true. Tutoring in the Writing Center, definitely.
Open communication with professors. Classmates are saying this, and the syllabus does this, and this was briefly mentioned. What do I actually do? Instead of
Yeah.
being willing to
Yes.
use stress.
I'm glad you brought that one up. Yeah, talking to professors, I think sometimes we can be really intimidated to do that. But they might have some really good tips for us on strategies or clarifying assignments or extra credit opportunities. You never know. So it's always a good idea to talk to professors, let them know you're struggling, and see if they have some tips for you on that. Yeah. Okay.
And another point to kind of self-care and what we're talking about is that sometimes your outside lives can become stressful, work can become stressful, family life can become stressful. Things come up, we might get sick, or loved ones get sick, or things like that happens. I don't know about you, but when my mind wanders because of outside stressors, I struggle to focus and concentrate. I can't. I find myself reading the same page of a book over and over. I don't know if any of you all have experienced that, but that's happened. And so being aware of just not just school, but your life as a whole is also important. So, don't forget to plan time for fun rec activities. Go have fun. This is a fun time in your life, and it is important to also chalk up time for whatever it is that you find enjoyable.
And that'll add to that overall relaxation that we were talking about too. Because you want to break out of that constant stress mode. So it's really key that you do those fun activities in between with that. And there's so many things going on campus in Manhattan, things like that. So take the time to have some fun and plan those things in your day or in your week as well.
So we have a video to show you all. I don't know if anybody has seen anything by Soul Pancake. Mm-hmm. 1 second.
Let's see if this. Try this. Why are we not?
But you're gooder than that. Life is not a game, people. Life isn't a cereal either. Well, it is a cereal. I think we all need a pep talk. I think we all need a pep talk. The world needs you to stop being boring. Yeah, you. Boring is easy. Everybody can be boring, but you're gooder than that. Life is not a game, people. Life isn't a cereal either. Well, it is a cereal. And if life is a game, aren't we on the same team? I mean, really, right? I'm on your team. Be on my team. This is life, people. You got air coming through your nose. You got heartbeat. That means it's time to do something. A poem. Two roads diverged in the woods, and I took the road less traveled. It hurt, man! Really bad. Rocks, thorns, and glass. My parts broke. Wah! Not cool, Robert Frost. But what if there really were two paths? I want to be the one that leads to awesome. It's like that dude Journey said, don't stop believing unless your dream's stupid. Then you should get a better dream. I think that's how it goes. Get a better dream and keep going. Keep going, and keep going. What if Michael Jordan have quit? Well, he did quit. No, he retired. Yeah, he retired. But before that, in high school, What if he quit when he didn't make the team? He would have never made Space Jam. And I love Space Jam. What will be your Space Jam? What will you create will make the world awesome? Nothing if you keep sitting there. That's why I'm talking to you today. This is your time. This is my time. It's our time. We can make every day better for each other. If we're all on the same team, let's start acting like it. We got work to do. We can cry about it, or we can dance about it. We were made to be awesome. Let's get out there. I don't know everything. I'm just a kid. But I do know this. It's everybody's duty to give the world a reason to dance. So get to it. You've just been pep talked. Create something that will make the world awesome. Play ball.
Cool. So that's Soul Pancake. Now you know. Get back to the.
Has anybody seen that before? That's been around for quite a while. Yeah, okay. So the point of showing you that was, he's excited, right? He's pumped up. He's like, yeah, we're going to do something awesome. And that goes back to those self-statements that we were talking about, making sure that you're pumping yourself up, giving yourself self-statements. And even if you have to watch something like that to get you pumped up or get you in a good mood or laugh at it, whatever. But finding those things that keep you in a positive mood, that are motivational, okay? There's another one, we didn't show it in here, but there's a little girl that's standing on her bathroom counter. I think her name is Jessica. Have you guys seen that one? And the whole video, she's just like, I love my house, and I love my mom, and I love my cat. And she's like super enthusiastic, but she is ready for the day. So whatever you have to do to pump yourself up, go for it. So we did want to go over a couple of things if you're still struggling. So you came to this, try some of the different things that we talked about today, but don't be afraid to reach out for additional resources on campus. So there are a ton of resources on this campus, one of those being counseling services. I know Casey mentioned that sometimes the stress in your life can kind of overtake what's going on academically, or it can make it really hard to focus on your academics. So if you need some help with some of those additional stressors that might be going on in your life, feel free to come to Counseling Services NCS. There's also the Family Center on campus that does counseling, so they're another really good resource. And then there's academic advising. I think they have started doing something that's called academic coaching. So that's something, I don't know if anybody has tried that, but that would be something else. The Student Access Center, tutoring, the Writing Center, I know those got mentioned, talking to your professors. There are all sorts of different things that we can do. There's also previously recorded cat chats that you can find if you go to the Counseling Services website. Those are located there, and there's some on like time management, stress management, other things that you might find helpful, because a lot of those things really do go together. So don't hesitate to reach out to those other resources. It's okay. I'd rather have you do it now so that you can be successful instead of get to finals week and then just be like, yep, this semester is just a total wash.